The Backrooms movie is finally here, and after seeing like all the reactions online, I feel like I'm in the minority because I actually really liked it. Is it perfect? No. But I understand some of the criticisms, absolutely. But some of the complaints I've been seeing honestly surprised me, especially when people say the movie has no story or that nothing happens. I don't really agree with that, like, at all. For me, this was a movie trying to be, wasn't, like this movie, it wasn't trying to be a nonstop jump scare roller coaster, right? Like, it felt much more interested in psychological horror, trauma, memory, and the way people respond to things they can't understand. And honestly, that's what it made it work for me. Now let's start with what I did like. First of all, the atmosphere is incredible. Kane Parsons did an amazing, outstanding, fabulous job bringing the backrooms onto the big screen. The yellow hallways, the endless rooms, the weird empty spaces, it all felt unsettling in exactly the way I hoped it would. The movie understands that the back rooms aren't just scary because there's always something chasing you, which there's not. It's scary because they feel familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Like, you've been there before, but you know you haven't, simultaneously, which is so weird, but that feeling carries almost throughout the entire film. And I also really like the main characters. Clark especially stood out to me. It's not because he's a perfect protagonist, because he's not. No one is. Nothing is. And honestly, that's part of why I found him so interesting. He's someone who clearly feels trapped inside of his own life. He's frustrated and he's very disappointed, and he feels like he never became the person he always wanted to become. And throughout the movie, you start realizing there's a much darker side to him underneath all of that. And I thought that what made him more compelling, I thought that made him more compelling than if he had just been a generic hero. And the therapist, Mary, was also great because she serves as a massive contrast to Clark, because both characters carry trauma. Both characters have emotional baggage, but they deal with it in completely different ways. And I think that's one of the biggest themes of the film. Now, let's talk about the thing that's probably dividing audiences the most, the movie's explanation of the backrooms. A lot of people expected the backrooms to be just an endless maze, a weird alternate dimension, maybe a place filled with monsters or ghoul gods or something, But this movie in particular takes a very different approach to it. My interpretation is that the backrooms does not just exist as a location. They react to people, absorb memories, absorb fears, and absorb trauma. And the deeper someone goes into the backrooms, the more the environment starts becoming a distorted reflection of their mind. The backrooms, and that's why, for the backrooms, that's why we see the locations that resemble places from the characters' lives. That's why certain creatures and copies seem connected to the people who entered inside of it. The backrooms isn't just a maze, it's almost like a broken memory machine. A place trying to recreate reality but never getting it quite right. And honestly, I think that's a really cool idea because it keeps the mystery alive, while also giving the world a very unique identity. One thing I especially liked was how the entities were handled without getting into every little tiny breadcrumb detail, I viewed a lot of the creatures less as traditional monsters and creatures and stuff like that, and more as like reflections of the people who entered the backrooms, distorted and incomplete versions. Things built from memories that are not perfect, and because memories aren't perfect, neither are the things that the backrooms create. That concept was honestly way creepier to me than simply throwing a bunch of random monsters into the movie. Now, with that being said, I do think the movie has flaws. My biggest issue is the pacing. There were multiple moments where I felt like the movie wasn't so really communicating how much time had passed. Certain character decisions felt rushed because of that, and especially for Clark, I feel like there's two very big character development moments that we just completely miss, especially in the dinner scene. Um, And like there are so much scenes where I understand what the movie was trying to do. I really truly do. I promise you do. But I think it could have been presented more clearly. And again, the dinner sequence is probably the biggest example of the entire film. Because I understand the symbolism, I understand what it represents, I do, but I also understand why some viewers felt disconnected from it. The execution doesn't always land strongly as the ideas behind it, and that's kind of how I feel about the movie as a whole. Don't get me wrong, the ideas are fantastic, the execution is usually good, but sometimes it falls just short of being great. Now let's talk about that ending. A lot of people seem confused by it, but my interpretation is actually pretty straightforward. Once someone enters the back room starts learning from them. Their memories, fears, experiences, and their trauma, and as it learns from them, it creates distorted copies and recreations of them. By the end of the film, we're seeing the consequences of that process. The Backrooms has already started incorporating Mary into itself the same way it did with Clark and his pirate self. It's not that somebody transformed her necessarily. It's that the Backrooms is doing what it has been doing throughout the entire movie. Copying, repeating, recreating, trying to understand people and failing in terrifying ways. The scientist scenes were also really interesting because they hint at something much bigger. The movie leaves a lot of questions unanswered and so much more to be desired, but I honestly think that's pretty intentional. Because it feels less like a complete conclusion and more like the beginning of a larger story to me. Normally, that would annoy me. It would. It really would. But in this case, I actually want a sequel. I want to learn more about the back rooms. I want to learn more about the research being done, and I want to see how different people affect the back rooms when they, enter it. Because if this place really is shaped by the minds of its victims, then the possibilities are basically endless. Like, imagine what happens when someone completely different enters. Imagine what happens when someone dangerous, maybe even a psychopath, enters. Imagine what happens when someone with an entirely different perspective on reality itself enters. That's where things could get really interesting. Now, overall, I walked out of the theater yesterday satisfied, not blown away or disappointed, just pretty satisfied. I think The Backrooms is a very strong horror movie with great atmosphere, interesting themes, solid performances, and a fascinating interpretation of the Backrooms mythos. It definitely has flaws. Some scenes could have been clearer. Some pacing issues hold it back, and I understand why it won't work for everyone, but honestly, for me, the positives outweigh the negatives. And if this really is the start of a larger Backrooms film series, I'm absolutely interested in seeing where it goes next. I'd probably give it a solid 8 or 9 out of 10, which, by the way, I don't do that a lot, so I highly recommend you guys check this out. Let me know what you guys thought of the movie down below, because this is definitely one of those films where I do think people are gonna be debating it for a very long time.